Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. And here I am today with our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore. How's it going, Bill?
Shalom Aleichem.
And peace be with you.
Peace be
All
with
right.
you.
All right. Let's see. It's funny. I can order food in a lot of languages and, can greet
Yeah,
people in
yeah,
a lot of languages, but
yeah.
it's
I'm the same way. So yeah.
let's see. So I want to start off talking today. We've got a number of articles. We've got some stuff about Google Nuclear. I got an article we probably do some counterpoint on about, what are EVs good for? Let's
Hmm.
see something about battery EVs and plug-in hybrid sales for August. It's probably a little behind the times. Let's see, world heading into the age of electricity. Something about Apple and batteries.
Yep.
Rugged electric bicycle. And I've got an article about used electric car prices. That's the recurrent report just came out
Oh, okay. All right. That'd be good.
for quarter four, and I got a couple other little things. I got something about a next generation electric vehicle battery. Actually, why don't we cover that first?
Okay.
So we've got a deal on next gen EV battery promises 186 miles with a 5-minute charge. 186 miles sounds funny, but it's actually 300 kilometers.
Right.
Okay, so anyways, but a company called Prologium. I wonder if it tells us where they're out. Oh, it's Taiwan. It's a Taiwanese company.
Taiwanese company.
Has
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
got a 100% silicon composite anode battery. It's highlighted its potential use for EVs at the Paris Motor Show. Claims a major leap in energy density and charging efficiency, promising 186 miles of range from a 5-minute charge. Now, what the article didn't talk about was what type of charger
Right.
delivered that
Exactly.
energy,
Yeah.
because we already know that that's possible. Current batteries on an 800-volt charger, like the ones from Gravity Chargers in New York City, with the right vehicle, of which there's a couple of Hyundais, there's a couple of
Oh, yeah.
Porsches, there's a
Yeah.
couple of weird, the Cybertruck is set for it, the other Teslas are not, but that charger can put, and I think that was really a charger designed for tractor trailers. It wasn't really designed for cars,
Yeah.
but it can put enough energy and it can charge about 40 miles per minute on a battery for the right ones, which is 200 miles of charge. So this one, I'm assuming the idea is on the chargers that are out now that it could deliver
Yeah.
that kind of range.
That's always one of the frustrating things about getting reporters to report on something that they sort of have a peripheral understanding of, but they don't understand. Well, it all depends on what kind of charger's in the car and what is the battery chemistry in the car, and that those types of questions.
Well, and some of these are questions that I better leave for Mike Herzog on Wednesdays. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And,
exactly. Yeah.
that's something in his engineering space, because I'm not going to pretend to know that I know everything about electricity and electric motors and
Same
batteries and
here.
all
Yeah.
that. My
Yeah.
biggest question is usually who is behind this. So Prologium is trying to expand from research and development into commercializing its energy solutions. But that's everybody. In the world of private equity, that's where you're raising money because somebody's done some R&D. They've spent money on R&D, and now
Right.
they've also got to be able to manufacture the thing.
Right.
Okay. It's trying to partner with German automotive firm FEV, which I think that's also to begin manufacturing battery packs in the near future. Now, I don't know who FEV is. I didn't do any research on that. A couple of weeks ago, Panasonic noted its 4680 cells were set to go into mass production, and they partnered with Washington-based Sila to use a silicone anode tech to achieve a 25% increase in battery energy density. But the thing I've got is I don't know who FEV is, and maybe they're strong enough to financially support the production and manufacture.
FEV. I'm trying to think if I'm sure I've seen it in the past, but I can't recall who. Obviously, not a big player. So
It's a globally leading engineering firm in Germany, but that doesn't tell me that they can produce. They have a lot of locations though. So
They're
I
probably
just did a
their role probably is helping set up the engineering manufacturing of the battery rather than, obviously producing cars. That's not their specialty. That
yeah. My,
sounds like.
my concern is who is funding it. Okay,
Mhm.
who's going to fund the production? Because if they can produce it, there's a market for it, right? There's companies out there that are going to buy the batteries as long as they're within a reasonable price range. All right, let's talk about Google and nuclear. So Google has launched a deal with a company called Kairos. That's Kairos with a K, which is a nuclear startup, and they're going to build 7 small nuclear reactors, supply electricity to data centers. The 7 reactors are scheduled to provide around 500 megawatts of carbon-free electricity.
Each reactor, or is that the total? I'm assuming that's each reactor.
That I'm trying to look at and see. I think that's total. I think they each produce around 70 megawatts.
Okay, all right, that sounds about right. They are, there was it Google that wants to restart 3 Mile Island and use
I'm
the electricity from the 3 Mile Island reactor to power their data centers there in central Pennsylvania.
I was thinking that was Amazon,
Yeah,
but
I think you're right. I think it's Amazon. Yep.
no, we've got several companies that are in the data center space that are now getting into nuclear power.
Yep.
And there's a reason. It's like we said before, when I heard people in Congress arguing about the grid can't handle EVs, it's like, wait till you hear about AI. It's like, forget about
Yeah.
your problem with EVs. It's like AI says, hold my beer. you
Yes,
know
exactly.
it,
Exactly.
it's not even close. Yeah. Adding EVs is like having an extra day of running your air conditioner each week. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
And it does,
the,
and generally it doesn't run all the time. Whereas I would bet you that there's no duck curve to the to AI, other than
yeah.
maybe in some part of the United States in the middle of the night where everybody's asleep and nobody's in there using the AI function. I mean, I use it all the time now. It's
I
just
got something funny for you. So, on one of the articles we're going to cover in the comments, somebody was saying that people are charging their EVs at night when there's no green energy available. It's like, I guess you're not familiar with the problem. There's too much wind at night, and there's too
exactly.
much wind power. That's one of the reasons why you can charge for free at night in
Yep.
some states.
Yep.
You know, I saw that and it's like,
Yeah.
man,
Give,
you
give
really
me
don't know what you don't know.
give me a load, please.
Yeah. We had a guy on one time and he said the number one problem with EVs is education.
Yeah.
And he said, because people just really don't know what they don't know. And there's so much misinformation in the space. But when I saw that about the guy saying there's no clean energy at night, it's like, you think the
Huh?
only clean energy is solar? And doesn't realize that there's other sources of clean energy. We have wind, we have hydro, we have nuclear. And although some people would argue whether nuclear's clean, but we see the same argument about, if you're having wind and solar, somebody had to manufacture
Somebody
the
had to
product. And,
manufacture those.
it's like,
Exactly.
yeah, well, you had to do that with everything else under the sun too. It's like, I really
So,
don't.
so you want light, right? What was
Yeah.
the first light? You had to take and burn a stick, right?
Hmm.
Anything that you do, you're going to be creating some kind of a byproduct. And
Yeah.
which would you prefer? Whale oil lamps or an LEDs, right? It's just
Well, it's kind of like the argument that kerosene and stuff like that was the replacement for
whale
everybody
oil.
for people burning wood in their house. Okay. And people still do this all over the world. There's still large parts of the world that burn wood for
Oh
cooking
yeah,
and fire and stuff like that.
yeah,
You
mainly,
can't just,
mainly for cooking. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but, and it's just like, so different sources of energy fix other problems. This is just like how they cleaned up the horse crap problem by inventing cars, right?
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, and people don't today have no idea how bad the horse crap problem really was in
Oh yeah.
1900.
Yep.
And cars were the solution. Go figure. But anyways, back to the new nuclear power issue. Google joins Microsoft and Amazon in turning to nuclear power to satiate its thirst for electricity. Microsoft is paying Constellation Energy to restart a reactor at 3 Mile Island. Now, that one at 3 Mile Island was only closed down in 2019. So this would be a lot like when our power plant here in Omaha was shut down.
Yeah.
Wasn't that 2018 or 19 when we had the flood? It was sometime
Yes.
around then.
2017, I think.
Oh, it was 17 we had the flood?
2017.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Mike and I
And
were talking about this.
damn near flooded the thing, which would not have been a good. It came really. In fact, they had to build barriers around the containment building where they put the the spent rods. So
Yeah, that was Mike and I were talking about that yesterday. When the facility was built, it wasn't in a floodplain, and then something changed with the river or something like that over time and changed it to a floodplain.
yeah.
So I
Well,
don't know exactly.
I think that probably has to do with when the Corps of Engineers, those people came in and straightened the river to try to minimize, because the Missouri River was, you look at the plain, it was just all over the place, and that river course changed constantly. Like for example, Council Bluffs here in town. There's a part of Nebraska that's actually Iowa, and there's a part
Yeah.
of Iowa that's actually Nebraska because the river course changed in the 20th century, or 20th century, it even changed. So I think part of that had to do with that straightening, and they, and also then upriver the flood control dams. And so what we had this 2017 flood is we had all that snowfall north in the Dakotas and in the Rockies that had an early spring melt, and it filled up that reservoir, and they had to protect that reservoir, so they let that water loose at a rate that hadn't been intended for the downstream flow, and that's where a lot of that flooding came
Well,
from.
and we had excessive rain at the same time.
And we had excessive
We
rain
had
here.
record rains, and we'd had record snowfall, followed by the rain was warm, and then it increased the
Melt rate.
the melt rate on the snow. Yeah, I remember it was really, what was they considered to be like a 500-year flood kind of thing. It was pretty bad. But anyways, yeah, it's weird that would be the thing that would affect our nuclear reactor. Amazon says it's going to build a hyperscale data center and directly connect it to another nuclear plant in Pennsylvania. If Kairos can hit the 2030 deadline, it'll be a slight revision to a recent forecast. As recently as July, the company was targeting commercial operations by the early 2030s. So we're still talking 6 years off. If Kairos can hit the revised target, it's locked in a race with fusion startups, many of which are aiming to turn on commercial scale power plants before 2035. Now, I wasn't under the impression that fusion really was quite ready. I mean, I realize that's still 11 years off, but they're trying to get it to a point where it can be commercialized by then.
Yeah, I've
So
seen a couple. I don't recall what it was, but I've seen a couple of stories where they're talking about some breakthroughs, and I think one of them had to do with using AI to basically better control and reduce the cost, apparently associated with doing with fusion as opposed to fission, which is, I'm assuming that that's what they're talking about with this Cairo project, because these are small scale.
they're fission. They're fission.
Yeah, they're fission
Yeah.
plants. Yeah.
Yeah. So most nuclear plants supply around 1,000 megawatts or more, but take years to plan and a decade to build. The newest fission reactors in the U.S. are units 3 and 4 at a place called Vogtle. were commissioned in 23 and 24, which snapped a 7-year drought in reactors. The next newest reactor was commissioned in 2016.
Yeah.
Before that, and the two in Georgia were 7 years late and $17 billion over budget.
Yeah. That's
17 billion. Yeah.
That's the problem with that technology. You can't. We were promised. If you go back to Atoms for Peace under I think it was probably Eisenhower administration, we were promised electricity that was so cheap they would give it away. That's not how it's turned out. It's typically the 10, I wouldn't say 10 times, but it's pretty close to that number, over what even renewables are today, and certainly over coal and some of those. So it's one of the most expensive forms of electricity out there.
Yeah. So 56% of Americans say they favor nuclear power and 44% remain opposed. Nuclear is so much safer than it used to be that it's pretty ridiculous. The levels, Mike and I were talking about this yesterday. There was a really bad reactor situation in the Soviet Union in the 50s or 60s. And I don't remember what this was, but nobody ever knew about it. Nobody knew about it till well after Chernobyl happened.
Yeah.
Okay. So Chernobyl happened in what, 89 or 90? Something like that.
Yeah.
It might have been 88. Anyways, and then you had 3 Mile Island.
3 Mile
Island
was in the 70s.
That was in the 70s. Yeah.
Just after I moved from Harrisburg. I used to live just upriver from that plant. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the other one was Fukushima, which, I remember when Fukushima happened, they tried to indicate that was going to be the end of human civilization. In some articles I read that eventually wipe out everybody, but it really didn't have that effect.
Well, it's still a problem they're working on. What are we?
I realize it is.
More than a decade later, they still trying to detoxify that thing.
Well,
I think they have a robot now that actually can now go in and survive the radiation to be able to start dismantling the destroyed parts of that reactor.
All right. Well, let's move on and let's talk about this article. EVs, what are they good for? Now, this was kind of interesting. This was it seemed like a bashing topic. There was a paper, The Effects of Buy American Electric Vehicles and the Inflation Reduction Act. So this article, the U.S. electric vehicles are only slightly less harmful to the environment and society than conventional gas cars, according to this new in-depth analysis. The surprise finding that a mere 10% difference between electric and gas vehicles' lifetime externality costs. Now, their theory is that EVs are blunt force killing people. Okay. Now, I've not ever seen any statistics on this topic, but the insurance industry certainly isn't making a big deal out of this. So I often wonder, where this is really coming for. So lifetime vehicle harms. The light blue at the bottom, the left is gas vehicles, the right is electric vehicles, shows CO2 harm from driving. Okay. Well, electric vehicles don't use CO2 while driving. The idea is that the CO2 there is coming from the coal factories and LNG factories used to power the electricity for the EVs. So that's the theory there behind this light blue color. The dark blue is the CO2 from the manufacturing process, which we acknowledge it takes more to make an electric vehicle than local pollutants from driving. Now, this one went back to saying, this article referenced that British paper that said that the EVs are chunking car tire particulates in the atmosphere, which, it's only happening if you live beside a drag strip, right? And so that was, something that this got a little bit out of hand. And then this last is the red. It says blunt force trauma deaths. Now it's showing a little bit larger for EVs versus gas vehicles. Now, apparently, whoever came up with this wasn't aware of tractor trailers, SUVs, pickup trucks, and all of that. They're saying that EVs are that much heavier that this is happening. It's like they're not that much heavier. There's plenty of we've seen plenty of articles talking about how a lot of the EVs don't weigh any different than their gas counterparts from the same manufacturers, like the BMW i4 and one of the equivalent 4 Series BMW weigh pretty much the same. The same thing with Mercedes and things like that, that there really isn't that big of a difference in the weight of the vehicle. So a lot of this I have to take with a grain of salt. I realize that I look for bias and everything, and even some of the articles that we get on that are praising EVs, I look for some of the bias in some of those. But this one, I'm not sure where they really came up with some of this.
Well, I tell you, the reason why I put it in there was because I do, the report was generated by a team, it says, of researchers at Duke, Stanford, UC Berkeley, and the University of Chicago, right? So that tells me that this is not necessarily a group of people that have a, innate bias against, I don't know, I can't say if they're not being funded by groups like the Koch brothers or whatever. But I felt that was it. I wanted to put it in there because I want all of us to be aware that there needs to be improvement, that this technology is not perfect. It's not a total solution. It's not a silver bullet, but that we need to work towards that. Now, if you will look where I put that article, right above it is an article about how they have come up now with a new motor that is 40% more efficient, or was it efficient? 40%. Let's see. Let me go back over here, and I'll go back to the article. So just above that, then, is magnet-free induction motor aims to nearly half the carbon emissions. So what I'm saying is that the technology needs to improve, but there are improvements being made. People are working on this, and now we've got a motor that doesn't need those rare earth minerals that everybody back when was complaining about. We're making progress, and so we want to continue to drive that progress. So there's improvement needs to be made. Where all they're getting their detail, I mean, we'd have to obviously go in and talk to the guys who were doing the research of the paper and ask them, where are you getting this? Why aren't you taking traffic into consideration? Because, I mean, honestly, how many EVs are out there, and how many of those EVs are, killing people compared to the number of accidents we're having from people being, rammed by overweight pickup trucks and semi trucks? And, we were talking before we went on Earth, I was mentioning you were mentioning somebody got broadsided by a cement truck and it flattened the F-150. And there was a case just over here near where I live, where a cement truck was going around a corner. It was a 2-lane turn, and the little car that was in the middle of that 2-lane turn, the cement truck was going too fast, and that big rotating, bin of cement tips over and it crushes the little car and kills the driver inside. So, are we including that in your statistics? Yeah.
Well, what's tough with this is stating that the EVs are killing people in gas cars. Okay. The EV people, the people in the EVs aren't the ones dying. So right. I find that kind of fascinating. So if everybody's driving EVs, then you wouldn't have the people in the gas cars dying.
What was the argument for everybody shifting from our little nice, comfortable, streamlined Ford, sedans to now we all drive SUVs and minivans? Why? Mm-hmm. Well, because they're safer.
Right, because they're big.
Because they're big. Here's the same argument then, okay? If you want to be safe, go buy an EV.
Yeah, I mean, the Tesla Model Y is considered to be the safest car on the planet.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons, I don't know if that's a big reason it sells so well, but I'm sure it's something people take into consideration when they're looking at it. I mean, you got to have some trade-off because the Model Y is an ugly car. Okay, there's no question. That is a god-awful, ugly-looking vehicle. I think the
I
Model
don't.
3 and the Model S look nice, but the Y and the X, you
Well,
know,
the X, I would agree with you on. The Y, I don't know. It's not, it's not too bad.
um, I'm just saying.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
I get it. I get it. I mean, I've
I
driven the
think
Model Y. I think they're fabulous, especially on the inside. They're
yeah,
great. Man, I just don't think they're that pretty on the outside. But damn, after watching that one flying through the air and flipping and hitting other cars and coming to rest on all four wheels and all four people inside getting out okay, it's
walk
like, man,
away. Yeah,
what a safe car. I mean, it's just really hard to fathom. And so when I see this, it's like they're causing fatality. Now, one of the things is I'm looking at Tesla that's super safe. Maybe people who are driving MGs are killing people. I don't know. Maybe people driving Chevy Bolts are killing people. Nissan Leafs are killing people. I don't know. But I really don't think that's the case. And you know, it's kind of wild to see. At the same time, we do know that Tesla drivers get an awful lot of tickets.
hmm
Okay. And part of that is because the cars are too fast.
well,
So
not
it's,
not 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 for me. My car's not that fast,
mhm.
but boy, is it quick. and that's the fun part when you leave, everybody else, you're already across the intersection and they're just starting into the
Right.
intersection, right? That is, I'm being bad, but that's
Yeah.
so much fun.
No, I get it. I get it. But I'm just saying, I mean, they come up with these weird, um, you know, stats. And, when you're saying they've got all of these people from all these prestigious universities involved in the study, but, I
Well,
just
do
don't
we?
see it.
Yeah, and do we know? I mean, all of this you have to take with obviously a grain of salt because so many of these studies are funded by interest groups, right? And so they get a grant. Somebody gives them a grant, and they said, "Would you study this?" Well, does that person studying that grant want to come out, with a finding that maybe opposes the interest of the group that funded it?
Yeah.
You know,
Well, the thing was like the whole thing with that article about the particulates, because this article quoted that. I mean, it was trying to say that it
well,
was, and you had done that calculation that the entire tire would have had to disintegrate every piece of the tire into the atmosphere every 4,000 miles.
yeah, yeah,
And we know that's not happening.
no.
And some people are wearing out their tires in 20,000 miles, but other people are saying they're getting this, 40, 50,000 plus miles on an
There's
EV.
there's a reason for that because, like I said, you're at a stoplight, you hit
Hmm.
it. I have every now and then I've gone screech as I'm taking off. Right, I'm leaving. Unfortunately, I don't try to do that as much as I used to, but I'm leaving rubber on the pavement. Right, and
Yeah.
if that's kind of the fun you get out of driving your EV, and of course they're a little heavier, and that's going to cause a little more wear and tear and that type of thing. So yeah,
Well, that article that was back from the break from the tire thing also stated that EV brakes were going through really fast, and most EV drivers don't even use their brakes, which made it even
that's
a little
yeah, that's
crazier.
that's why you use the regenerative braking. Now mine has regenerative braking, but it's not one pedal. I still have to press the brake. But current cars, current version, latest models of the cars have the one pedal driving, and as soon as you let off the accelerator, the car begins to slow down and it will stop on its own without you ever having to touch the brake. Takes a little training, but you don't have to. It uses all that energy, all that kinetic energy that you've built up in that car going forward. You're not just getting rid of it as heat and shards of metal being cast into the atmosphere. You're putting that all of it back into, or pretty much most of it back into the battery.
1 second. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's move on to the International Energy Ag excuse me, International Energy Agency.
Yeah, there's
So,
an interesting article.
all right, so the world heading into the age of electricity. So,
Mhm.
more than half of the world's electricity will be produced by low emission sources before 2030. That's a pretty big claim.
That's an astounding figure. Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah, the deployment of clean energy is far from uniform across the globe. Now, one of the things, and without delving into this art, oh, I accidentally said delve. People are going to think I'm AI again. Um, that's the AI trigger word,
I
right?
have
Yeah,
actually met him, folks. He's real. He's not an AI.
yeah, I'm not a bot. Anyways, but we a lot of times take for granted. We live in the United States, that every place is like the US, or the world revolves around the United States. And sometimes this is a challenge to understand that a lot of people in this world, we were just talking about, still cook with wood. Okay.
Hmm.
Or they may
Charcoal.
even
Yeah.
heat with wood, and they may still shovel coal into something to cook. And so we kind of take for granted that we live in the United States. We're used to having power and water and all these things and live in a modern society. A lot of the world still doesn't. And and Africa, I don't know what for the whole continent, but I know when I've looked at statistics for individual countries, often they have electrification in for anywhere from 40 to 50% of the populations. So when you think about some country with 50 million people, 25 million of them don't have access
Oh,
to
yeah.
electricity at home or water. It's just really hard to fathom. Okay. And so some of this is developing energy sources in some of these other parts of the world. Okay, so this isn't all just saying that, we're certainly not going to convert all the last of our coal burning facilities. So what are we, about 20% coal in the United States, I think it is, for the entire country. That's not all going to
Uh,
get converted in the next 6 years. LNG is not going anywhere. So in the United States, because of data centers, we're struggling to keep up with energy demand. And there's all kinds of sustainable energy projects that have already been built, solar and wind, that haven't been connected to grids. Okay. And my understanding, there's as much to be connected yet that already exists on the grid. And currently, solar and wind are about 20% of US energy. But even if you double it, it's still not going to be at 40. It's going to be probably at like a
yeah.
third, because LNG is going to keep growing. I don't see that stopping. Coal's going to keep declining. There's no question coal's going to decline. But to go to zero, coal's probably going to take 30 years. I just don't see it happening
Although
that fast.
interestingly, they shut down the last coal-fired plant in the UK last month. I think it was last month. Within the last couple of months here, the very last coal-fired power plant in the UK has now been shut down. Which you
Well,
think?
a few months ago, that happened in Hawaii. So the last one in Hawaii
Yeah,
got shut down.
yeah.
So, we're seeing it happen. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm just saying it's going to be slow. And one of the problems is that energy demand is increasing. Not, and like I said before, it's not so much because of EVs. EVs are a drop in the bucket compared to what's coming with electricity. And Musk has talked about this, how starting next year, there's going to be huge energy shortages due to how fast AI is growing. And I look at some of the things that he's done with his XAI, and he's already gotten criticism because he actually figured out how to produce power at his facility in Memphis. They put in somewhere between 15 and 20 gas turbines,
Yeah.
and they're cranking out their own power. And some people are saying it's contributing to pollution in Memphis, and it's like, okay,
Well, it's if he's firing that with if he's firing it with methane, natural gas, he's obviously going to be giving off CO2, and there's going to be
right.
nitrous oxides that are being generated, and there's probably some particulates, although I couldn't tell you what they were, but I know there are two gases, carbon dioxide and nitrous oxides.
Yeah, I saw something that said that it just opened and it's already like the number 9 polluter in the Memphis market.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, I mean, I don't know what the others are, but sounds like a big deal. It sounds like a big deal to me, but, it's tough to go in there. They had to work real closely with the local power company to make that happen. But anyways, back to our story on the International Energy Agency. They're saying demand for oil, gas, and coal is still projected to peak by the end of the decade. So this is something, it's like they're trying to say, because I've seen this before, people trying to say we're at the peak of fossil fuels and all that, but I keep seeing sales of petroleum products going up every year. It's typically about 5% a year. And regardless of how fast electric vehicles are growing, it keeps going up 5% a year. And part of that is because there's other parts of the economies, like artificial intelligence, that require all of this energy, and there's other things it's being used for. So, we've been talking about nuclear, we've been talking about all these other types of possible alternative energies, but those are slow. I mean, put in those nuclear plants, people are talking about it taking a decade to put some of this stuff in. I mean, that's a long time horizon. There's going to be a lot of energy demands between now and a decade from now, as far as powering. But we're moving at a speed into the age of electricity, which will define the global energy system going forward, increasingly be based on clean sources of electricity. Well, we see tremendous investment. It's saying here 2 trillion in investments are flowing into clean energy projects each year, nearly double the amount spent on fossil fuel supplies, according to the Paris-based agency. Together with nuclear power, which is a subject of renewed interest in many countries, low emission sources are set to generate more than half of the world's electricity before 2030. I don't know. Like I said, can they build those nuclear power plants that fast?
Well,
That's definitely a question.
if they're the micro, I hate to use the term micro, but comparatively speaking, the micro nuclear plants, it'll be interesting to see what the development cycle on those is. A lot of these are designed so they just bring the thing in the back of a flatbed truck, and it generates, I don't know, whatever it is, 5-10 megawatts. I'm not that familiar with it, obviously. So we've got we've just got some kind of alert on our broadcast stream here of something not quite working. So Dave's trying to correct it.
Yeah, well, that's
anyway. So I just thought it was interesting there that the International Energy Agency is coming out and saying, guess what? We're moving towards an EV world. So while he's working on that, I'll keep going. We should mention, there he is. He's back. Do we want to talk about the Apple?
Yeah, I wanted to get on to the Apple discussion. So Apple reportedly was working with BYD to develop a battery for its now canceled car. It's weird that this is coming up as news now, but who knows why. Apple worked with they were collaborating with BYD to develop batteries using lithium iron phosphate, or LFP batteries.
Right. Yep.
Apple contributed engineering expertise, particularly in areas like heat management and advanced battery packs, while BYD supplied its manufacturing resources and proprietary LFP technologies. It was intended to be safer than most EV batteries at the time, per Bloomberg, as well as longer range. Well, I would expect Apple can dump. Apple's sitting on a lot of cash. There's a lot of things they can do.
Spending $1 billion a year on this program, the Apple Car program. And I gather from one of the articles I saw that while they didn't get the battery they wanted out of the collaboration, because obviously they killed the car program, they did get some other technology, one of which includes apparently their augmented reality, the glasses that they developed. The
Vision Pro and the neural engine chips.
Yeah. So they did get some benefits out of it.
Yeah. Well, And I'm sure BYD did as well. It's
I
interesting
would
to see that.
imagine BYD probably learned a lot from that collaboration, I would think.
You know, it always strikes me that Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett were pretty hands off with BYD, but you probably suspect they had a lot of influence with Apple, okay, because they own a lot of Apple,
Yeah.
or they did.
Yeah.
And but the fact that they were big shareholders in both companies,
Yeah.
always makes me wonder about some of this
Yeah.
cross-pollination here, you know.
And I should point out that I just saw an article here that's featuring Stella Lee, who was talking
Mhm.
about, I think, in relationship to BYD's displays and things at the Paris Air Show, the Paris Car Show that's going on right now. And of course, when BYD was bringing their vehicles here because they were part of the Berkshire Hathaway investment family, I got a chance
Mhm.
to actually interview her, which was a lot of fun.
Um, let's see here. Let's go ahead and let's move on to the Neo rugged electric bikes. So this was it's not a bad looking, it
Yeah,
looks like, it looks like a real casual bike to me, but let's see what
It
we've
it
got here.
it was, yeah, it's fairly. I love the photographs. I love the design. These are typically the kind of things you see in a website called Yanko Design, which is, a site where designers typically, show 3D illustrations of what they're working on. I don't even know if this bike's actually even been built. All the illustrations in there are really good, high quality 3D illustrations. So it's sometimes real hard to tell, is this really a bike in existence, or is this really a good, 3D illustration of what the product might look like when it gets built? But I love the design. I thought, you know what, I'm going to feature it as one of my editor's choices.
All right, let's see. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at, because I didn't really take a look at this article, but this is really saying, let me see. Oh, it has some just general stuff. E-bikes or sustainable and an energy
There,
efficient
this
way of
is
navigating congested cities. We know all that.
this is typical Yanko design. If you're a 3D design nerd, which I kind of am, they put all these beautiful, illustrations in there. Very little information, though. I mean, I even went over to the guy's website, and there's nothing over there as well. So this was my what can I use the term 3D porn?
Yeah, there you go.
In my engineering porn fetish, right? That I mean, these things are beautiful. I wish I had the skill that these guys do. So yeah, I
Oh,
just
I like how this instead of the metal chain that always comes unhooked.
yeah,
Sometimes you're
yeah,
changing sprockets.
it's a Gates belt, which is
Yes.
kind of the thing on e-bikes now. And then you got adjusting your position. I mean, it's really attractive.
It's interesting. They seem actually more simplistic than a 10-speed or 12-speed type bike.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you don't, you know what? I have an e-bike, and once I set it to the speed where I'm comfortable, I never use the gears. You really don't need them. So in this case, I'm sure that motor where the crank is, there's some gearing in there, and you can change that. But with an e-bike, you seldom have to, change gears. That's what the electric motor's for. You hit a hill, you don't gear down, you just simply use the motor to get you up the hill. So,
All right. Well, my last article I want to cover today is the recurrent report for
yeah.
Q4. It's on the used electric prices and market report. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up on the screen so people can see what I'm talking about. Recurrent's a real interesting company because they do stats on the EV space. But the other thing is they have this software that you can run on your EV that tells you how your battery life is.
Yeah.
And so they supply a lot of data related to how people's batteries work. And in some cases, some EV only sales companies or car dealerships, as people like to call them, put this on their website with every car they have for sale, and it'll give a battery rating that's a percent of the original battery range, and it kind of gives you an idea, because an EV battery, until it hits about 70%, is considered to still be in good shape. And so, and most of the ones, like, well, on the one place that I follow where they publish them, they don't sell any that are below. The lowest I've ever seen was 91%.
No.
So you've still got a lot of useful life typically. And what was it? You're supposed to lose 1% about every 13,000 miles is kind of the supposed average magic number for, how an EV battery should decline. So you should lose about 10% every 130,000 miles, which that gives you almost a 400,000 mile useful life on an EV battery.
Yeah.
Of course, it doesn't always work out that way.
And who owns the same car for 400,000 miles?
Nobody. Well, I'm not saying nobody. I mean, we've seen cases of that. There's exceptions.
Uber drivers, yeah.
Yeah, and I've known some people who've had pickup trucks that they're on their third or fourth engine, but they like the body of their pickup truck and the cab of their pickup truck, so they keep dropping engines into their pickups. But some of that makes sense, because a pickup truck body and everything has a certain useful value, regardless, and it's worth continuing to do that. But anyways, this is talking about popular 3-year-old EVs converge around 25 to 30,000, and used EV rebate creating a price floor at 25,000. And the reason is, if you can get one of these used EVs cheap enough as a dealer so that you could sell it for 25,000, the buyer gets that $4,000 tax credit. So what happens is that you see a lot of $25,000 EVs, or cases where if it's close, they'll just go ahead and sell it for that, because somebody's not going to buy a $26,000 EV and not get the tax credit. So there seems to be some challenges. So as we come here, we see that two of the cars, the green and the purple. So the purple is the recurrent price index of all EVs, and the green is the Volkswagen ID4. So you've got the Mach-E and the Model Y, though. Model Y is in yellow, sits at around 32,000, and the Mach-E is around 29,000. So they're a little bit above that magic number. That's why the reasons when we've had Alex Lawrence from over in Utah saying he sells about 100 Tesla Model 3s. Well, this purple recurrent number is, a lot of it is because of all of those off-lease Tesla Model 3s being sold. And they're being sold for 25,000, anywhere from 23 to $25,000, and they get that $4,000 tax credit, and those things are selling like crazy. And I don't think it's just Alex's company. I'm sure plenty of other places are selling and getting that, using that $4,000 tax credit. Let's see. Used EV prices stable throughout 2024. Market maturity reached after 45% price decreases over the last 18 months. Well, a lot of that was cars really went up in value during the pandemic. There was all these supply chain issues, different things. Used cars, I knew people who had bought used cars in like 2019 and 2021. 2 years later, they were being offered more money to sell their car for cash than what they'd paid for it 2 years before. And there was lots of cases of people who'd bought Teslas, and a year later that used Tesla was worth more than what they'd paid for it. But then starting in 2022, 23, the prices have come back down to normal. And so what's happened? And then you take in the rebates and you have massive depreciation on a lot of EVs. Since becoming a real market force in 21, EVs developed a reputation for significant depreciation. While vehicle depreciation is up across most vehicle types and powertrains, EV depreciation thus far has not been reflective of a mature, stable market. In the
Yeah.
past 4 years, EV prices rose quickly with COVID and then fell rapidly with dramatic Tesla price cuts. Let's
Well,
see
that
here.
too, and the fact that there's more competition out there for them as well. So
Yeah. Um, let's see. The $25,000 price limit drew a big line in the sand that many bidders wouldn't cross. That accelerated the decline in values to that break-even point. But then once the collective EV reseller market understood where that line was, they flocked to purchase vehicles that towed the line. So there's high demand from dealers up to that price point, but almost no demand above it. So that's quite fascinating. I mean, I just couldn't imagine going and looking for a $29,000 used EV. It makes sense to buy one in the United States and take advantage of that tax break. Let's see if this, they keep using the Model Y, and the Model Y is not going to quite get there. Let's see. This one incorporates the Model 3. So most 2022 EV models converging towards $25,000. So the light blue down here at the very bottom is the Chevy Bolt. Okay. Chevy Bolts can be found under $20,000, and you can get the $20,000 or the $4,000 tax credit. Do they have Nissan Leaf on here? I don't see the Leaf on this list, which is kind of sad, because I'm sure the Leaf would have been good market data. But the darker blue, oh no, that's the Model S. Let me see where we got the Model 3, the brown. So this number here, the second one, it's even occasionally got some coming under $20,000 here on the Model 3. I have seen some that have definitely been cheaper, but if you look at a lot of places, like Car Gurus and other places for used car prices, there just aren't a lot of used EVs for sale below 25. They get snapped up pretty fast. Now, a lot of places in the ad, it may state, they usually have a picture, it'll say price includes the $4,000 tax credit, or or it'll at least say eligible for the $4,000 tax credit.
yeah.
Some sites like Carvana, they have a separate page just for tax credit cars. So you can hit a link on their site for that and see what all cars they have that are eligible, because it's not just EVs, it's also the plug-in hybrids that are eligible as well. That just have to be below $25,000, and you have to be below a certain income limit, which isn't terribly hard to hit. But anyways, I thought that made for a pretty good story. And so I think that's about all we're going to cover today.
Bottom line then is, go take, if you're interested in an EV, go take a look what's available, because you could probably pick up something. It may have 50 to 70,000 miles or something on it, but
yeah,
under 30,000, probably close to 25, and if you throw the tax credit in, you're looking at $19,000 or $20,000.
One of the things is, and people are reluctant because they think that you see all these things like, what is it, that EVs are disposable. They only last for 50,000 miles or some crazy crap like that. And they all have a minimum of 8-year, 100,000 mile powertrain and battery warranty. So, and then when you get into something, now Tesla does that minimum on the rear wheel drive, but when you move up to the long range, it goes to 120,000. And if you go to one of their premium vehicles, it goes to 150,000. And then if you were to buy a used Rivian, which they didn't even have on there as examples, the used Rivians have 175,000. So, I mean, there's a lot of, room and a lot of life left on. Now, do they still have other issues? Sure. The most common thing I see people replacing are either things like door handles, trunk releases, windshield wipers, but those aren't something that you wouldn't have issues with on a regular car as well. I mean, Yeah, you're going to have more frequent tire replacements. Not a lot. It's probably 20% more often that you're replacing tires, but you're not going to be replacing brakes. So, you've got kind of a trade-off there. What you save in brakes, you might make up for with spending more on tires. But, there's just a lot of things. You're not doing oil changes,
Yep.
so there's a lot of things you're not doing. If you go to buy one, make sure you don't buy an extended warranty with free oil changes.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'd be bundling that with every EV if I was a dealer. Free oil changes with your EV.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. But anyways, all right. Well, folks, I want to thank everybody for watching today.
Thank
And
you.
Bill and I will be back on Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Otherwise, have a great weekend.